Okay.
All right, State's Exhibit number 99 is admitted without objection.
No. Detective Doyle, I know I didn't ask you about this yet, but drag factor. Did you and Detective Martinez go to the scene later and test for drag factor?
We did, because part of what she needs to do with my diagram is she's going to do an energy analysis, is basically what you call it. You can get speeds from the tire marks, the scrape marks, and momentum analysis of where the two impacts happened. And you combine all that together, and that will give you the speed of the truck when this happened. That's your ultimate goal. You start at points of rest and you move back to the first area of impact. And when you're doing your speed calculation, and you add all these items together, the momentum calculation for where the two vehicles struck each other, and then the length of the tire marks, scrape marks, all that kind of stuff. But you need a drag factor for the tire marks. That's measuring the relative stickiness of the road, I guess is the nicest way to put it. If you look at this in these pictures, sometimes you look at it, it has like grooves in it.
I'm gonna show you.
It's for
Exhibit number 49.
water dispersal. Yeah, you can see it right here, right along in there, right along the white line. You can see the grooves in it. It's for water dispersal. But it makes it not as sticky as, let's say, it's asphalt. Okay, so your tires stick better to asphalt than they do on this. So you have to go out and get a reading of the stickiness of the road where the crash happened.
Yes,
And object to narrative.
I'll move on.
sustained.
Okay. We'll move on from that, but I mean,
Sorry.
in the end,
I like what I do. I'm just trying to explain it.
it's very interesting. We could go on forever, but
Yes.
time is limited. You know that. But the fact is you and Detective Martinez actually went out there and performed this drag factor test out there, or drag factor.
Yes, we put an instrument in the vehicle and measure it. Yes.
And measured it, and you got that information. You and Detective Martinez got that. Is that correct?
Yes, I was driving and she was collecting the information.
I want to move on to another subject. Line of sight
Yes,
from the area of impact 1,
yes,
looking south.
correct.
Did y'all determine how far it was, or did you look?
Yes, as we were leaving the scene, that's the last thing we did. Detective Martinez and I went down and we just measured it on the odometer because it's the easiest thing to do. Honestly, we had broken down everything. We didn't measure. We just did it with the odometer in the car, and it was roughly half a mile.
Half a mile. And so you're saying that from the area of impact 1, where the truck hit that Honda Accord, that it was roughly a half mile you could see down the road.
It was probably more than that, but for sure a half a mile.
I'm going to show you state exhibit number 98. This is looking south from the area of impact 1. And so looking back south, you're looking all the way back this way. Is that correct?
Right.
And I know that, you know, this area has overpasses and areas like that. So what would you describe the drive up to area of impact 1? Is it a hill, or is it
It's a slight rise.
a slight rise?
It's not, some bridges are like this, that are like a big hump, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so you can't see, if you're here, you can't see what's over there because of line of sight. That's not like, it's not like that here. It's going to an elevation, but it's a slight rise, slope is the term we use.
Thank you, Sergeant Doyle. I
That's
appreciate
fine.
that. Pass witness.
Defense.
Sergeant, sorry.
That's fine.
Detective again.
Works either way.
Yeah, thank you, Sergeant. So where are you working now?
District Attorney's Office.
Oh, right, okay. With these guys?
They work in the criminal trial division. I work in intake. I do the intake on the same cases that I worked before. vehicle death cases, serious bodily injury cases, failure to stop or render aid deaths.
That makes sense, right? Because you're experienced. So, and I want to talk, sorry, it's turned off. And that makes sense. That goes with your experience, right? I wanted to ask you about some of your training and experience. You said earlier that it was not on this night in question back in 2022, you actually made 3 scenes that night.
I think it was more like 5.
Oh, wow. So you made 5 scenes that night.
I think this was the 5th, I believe. I'm not positive. All I can tell you, it was very busy.
And I'm not asking you to commit to that. I thought, so 5 scenes, and that's 5 scenes in the SAPD's jurisdiction where there was either a fatality or serious injury, right?
Correct.
And this isn't uncommon on a night, is what you said.
This was a weeknight. It's kind of uncommon on a weeknight. On the weekends, that's normal.
But that's normal on the weekend.
Yes.
Right. So that's a lot of wrecks. And on that day, you actually went to multiple crash scenes.
Yes.
And you know that when you used to do one of the responsibilities of the police go to scene is to write crash report.
That's the patrolman.
And that was, there may be a patrol officer will write a crash report, and that goes to TxDOT, the Texas Department of Transport.
That's correct.
And they use that for statistical purposes.
That's exactly what its purpose is.
And so they take you, so the patrol person, whoever that is, identifies certain vehicles. Is that right?
That's right.
And it's normally to determine who's at fault, maybe. Well,
He
explain
gives
that
his
there.
opinion.
Yeah, there we go. In their opinion.
Correct.
That's a better way to put it. They decide, hey, and they normally describe vehicle 1, vehicle 2, vehicle 3, and so on.
That's right.
And how is it normally labeled on the report to who's at fault, in their opinion?
There's codes on
Right.
the report.
Right, and so there's a code for who's responsible.
But it's factors is the way it's put in there. But that's there can be a lot of different. There's something like 80 something factors.
Yeah.
But yes, that's what his opinion is.
And their opinion, they put together who they think is at fault, and they submit that to the TxDOT.
Right.
Basically, the DPS, right?
And it's actually TxDOT.
TxDOT, Texas Department of Transport.
Yes,
And
it's separate from DPS, and like you said, its purpose is stats. That's all.
And they produce the stats for the state of Texas.
Correct.
And they produce the stats, statistics of fatalities on the road.
Right.
And non-fatalities on the road.
Distracted driving while intoxicated.
Yeah.
It's those factors that we're talking about.
And they can break it down per county, right?
They can.
And across the state.
And they can break it down by, let's say, San Antonio, Castle Hills, Balcones Heights. They can do all that.
And that's available online.
Yes, I've never asked for stats. I got to be honest with you.
All right, okay, fair enough. You haven't asked for stats. But did you know that was the Friday, the 22nd of July was the deadliest day on Texas roads in 2022?
Did I know that? No.
You didn't? Do you know there were 30 persons
No,
killed in
it's an
traffic
objection,
accidents?
he's testifying it doesn't know that from the doctor.
Sustained.
But we can agree you had a very busy night.
Objection.
All right, that objection will be overruled to the question. We can agree you had a very busy night.
Yes.
All right, so I want to go back to some of the things that you spoke about, but there were no other fatalities that night, right, to the best of your recollection.
To the best of my recollection, I think that was the one in San Antonio.
All right, so I think how you got to this scene is you were going off duty and then you were told that there was a scene that you had to go to.
Right. We were finishing up. After we go out to a scene, we have to send out it's a notification of the incident. And we were in the process of doing that for the scenes that we had gone to when we learned we needed to go to this one.
Right. And so you made this scene, and I guess you're not the primary investigator. That was Detective or Sergeant Martinez.
Right.
So your role was, you've got the Leica robot station.
Robotic, yes.
which is and it's on a tripod,
The total station part of it is.
total station's on a tripod, and your job is to do this, to map the scene.
Correct.
So you said initially that you walk around the scene and you're asked to map the scene, and you helped mark things on the road evidence using spray paint.
I didn't do much marking. As I recall, I think mostly what I did was the vehicles. As I was walking, doing it at that, when I was doing that, we were deciding what color is going to be what and all that kind of, but I marked the vehicles, as I recall, and that's pretty much it. The
Right.
rest of the sergeant and the detectives were out there doing that because, like I said, it's a long scene and it took a minute.
So you guys, between you, whoever's there investigating, you get together. Is that what your testimony is? That you say, hey, we're gonna like area 1, AO1 is we're gonna do orange. There's no set colors for vehicles or anything like that. It's
No, we determine that. We just get out, we find out what colors paint we have. Yellow, we didn't always have. Green and orange, we always did, but yellow, we didn't always have, but we had it that night. So we decided what vehicle was going to be what and did it.
right. Because I want to talk to you about some of the variables that are involved in this, because like you said, that it's area of impact, not point of impact, right?
Correct.
Because you can't say with a percentage of scientific certainty that it's a point of impact.
Right. It's a general area. It's close.
Yeah, and so one of the other variables is you're walking around on the scene, and you said that maybe you didn't do everything, but other folks are spraying pieces of debris that they think come from certain vehicles, right?
I don't believe we marked any debris in this scene. What was marked in this scene, it was scrapes and tire marks, final rest. Sometimes debris is important. I'll give you an example. On a wrong way driver, when I'm trying to determine which vehicle is going the wrong way, I can find the headlight to this car and it'll be farther down the road, and I can say, okay, this car was going this way. And the others so we'll mark like the headlight assembly that came out of the car. I don't recall doing much, at least on this one. It was more the roadway evidence, the tire marks, the final location, the areas of impact, that sort of thing.
Fair enough. It's just that one of the things we spoke about, and I can't recall which state's exhibit it is. There was for example, captured in the picture was a bumper. We think it's a bumper, right? And that's roadway evidence as well, right?
Not really. It's roadway debris, and this is why. I don't know that moved. There were other cars on the road when this happened. I don't know if that's been moved, so I'm not going to shoot anything that I'm not sure of, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Sergeant. That's exactly my point. So we don't know. We don't know if things have been moved. Debris
wise, I don't know that debris has been moved.
Yeah.
Vehicles did not move.
No.
The reason that the 18-wheeler was not painted into the scene is because it did move. And so I couldn't say, okay, it was here when this happened. He pulled up. I believe the truck was like right up against it or something. So I didn't put that in the scene because I didn't know where it went. Now, the vehicles did not move. The tire marks, the scrape marks, and all the things that I put in the scene obviously didn't move because they're on the ground.
Fair enough. That's the exact point I was going to make. I didn't want to interrupt you. That because you weren't there when the accident happened, right?
No.
Because you were called, or TID was called, and you didn't turn up for 3 hours.
We came when we found out that it was there. They called us earlier in the night and they didn't know really what they had.
That's fair enough. I'm not asking you to go into that. I'm just saying there was a long gap between you getting there and it happening. Yeah, and that's all I was asking. So because you weren't there at the scene, you don't know if vehicles were traveling through that scene, disturbing debris at the time of the wreck.
I would assume that it's possible, yes.
Yeah, and it's also possible if people who are in the scene walking around, they could be touching things with their feet and things could be getting disturbed. Right?
Which is precisely why I didn't map it.
That's why you didn't map it. Exactly. That's exactly why you didn't map it. So, and that I appreciate that. Thank you, Sergeant. So let's move on. You said there was no pre-impact braking as far as you can see by the truck, which was Mr. Castro's vehicle, right?
Right.
And there was, and I think it's, and is that states 98? Yes, sure.
Yes.
So this is, so Sergeant, this is, so on this picture here, and it's listed as AO1, right? Excuse me, getting there.
AOI one.
AOI,
It-
area
there-
of impact.
Yes,
And that's the first one,
yes.
right? So this is the first impact that's caused,
With the truck striking the Accord.
right? And it's marked here approximately by this, what do you call that? Scrape in the road? Is that,
Seam is what I guess that is.
Is it-
I'm not sure what that is.
because
You're talking about this white line.
We can't do that, Sergeant.
Yeah, understood.
So I'll let you finish.
No, this mark, I don't know what is. That is that's a mark from the wheel.
Right, okay, so we're talking about, let me go back over, let me put back, maybe this is better, I just wanted to clarify. You're actually talking about the area of impact one, the first one is this mark here that I'm indicating at the bottom of the screen here.
Right.
And that's a scrape that's produced from a wheel rim, is that right?
And the tire mark.
Tire mark, but it's not a skid mark,
No,
so there's no evidence of pre-impact braking.
right.
And from, I mean, this picture is a pretty good indication of it. There's from your, there's no indication on the road evidence of any attempt to swerve
Right.
or maneuver, evasive maneuvers, right?
Exactly.
Is that fair enough? So
Fair enough.
there's, and then you said that you've been doing that, was it 32 years, Sergeant?
I did, I was on the police department for 30 and a half years. I worked for in traffic investigations for 14 and a half.
And you, I think your testimony is thousands of accidents.
Seen, sure.
Thousands of accidents. And you said that just from your training experience, you could determine from going to the scene, seeing the field of debris and the distance that the vehicles have traveled, it was a high speed impact.
Damage to the vehicles,
I think that's what you said.
distance the vehicles traveled after impact. Again, I explained like the track that the truck took was straight as opposed to the Accord. All those things let you know it's a high speed impact with regards to the truck.
Yeah, so knowing what vehicles are involved now, what you're seeing is a person who's driving a vehicle into the rear of a car without any braking or evasive maneuvers, right?
That's it.
And you'd agree that suggests that person isn't aware of the potential consequences.
Or is not paying attention, one of the two.
Right, so it's possible they're not aware, right?
For one reason or another, they're either not paying attention or not aware.
Or not aware, because otherwise, if they're not paying attention, they're not aware, right?
Right, there's going back to the factors on the crash report, there's a million reasons why people aren't, it's called distraction in the vehicle. I've had people drop phones and crash. I've had people text and crash on the phone. There's lots of reasons to be distracted.
Because in your training experience, you know that driving a vehicle like that, you likely to kill yourself if you drive into the back of someone like that, right?
There's a good possibility of injury, yes.
And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the judgment.
Yes.
The markings here. So I think you said that on the blow ups, well, we've got a smaller version where this is one that the juries have seen, and it states 94 to 97. So you said your testimony was that you do all of this on the scene. You go to the scene.
Yeah.
Right. So and you're an expert in what you do.
Yes.
And you're the purpose of you going to the scene is to map the scene accurately at the time.
Correct. That's what my purpose was.
As accurate as you can, right?
Right.
And I think your testimony was, and that's to highlight to the jury and represent to the jury what the scene looked like at the time.
Honestly, the purpose of this is it's an exhibit for y'all to see in court.
Yeah.
Point one. point two. And the most important point is it allows Detective Martinez to do an energy analysis
Of course.
to a determined speed.
Yeah, and I apologize, of course it is. But one of the things you said is it's to, because we can't take the jury to the scene and show it to them, can we?
Well, that scene isn't the same. Like I said, that's an entrance ramp right now. It's completely different.
That's a
now.
no, right? Because they can't. This is
It's not
impossible. Possible, because even if we could take them to the scene, it's changed.
That's right.
I mean, like this was 281, right? It was changing daily.
Pretty much, yeah.
You drive up there now, this is, I don't know, like 4, maybe 5-lane highway. Right?
I believe it's 4, but I'm not sure. I try hard not to get up there.
Probably, yeah. But anyway, we'll leave that, right? But so it's completely different now. Even if we could go back to the scene, it's changed. But so this is the best representation that you can give to the jury of what a scene looks like 2 years later.
Precisely why I shot that sign to give a point of reference.
Any other representation would be a misrepresentation, right?
Yes.
And Sergeant, you wouldn't drive your vehicle at 90 miles an hour into the back of a car, would you?
No. Never have.
No, because that would be suicide, right?
There's a good likelihood of being hurt.
Thank you, detectives. Thank you, Sergeant. I've got no further questions. Thank you, sir.
No, he wasn't. He left the scene that night.
You have to see that later on after the investigation, right?
Yes, he did.
Let me ask you, this council brought this up, there's reasons why somebody would be driving 90 miles an hour down the highway. What is the number one reason that somebody runs into somebody in the back going 90 and doesn't brake?
You object to speculation, Judge?
Overrule. Council, you open the door.
The highest reason, in particular, at the time that this occurred, which is O-bar 30, right after the bars get out, is intoxication.
Yes. So council, with regards to the last question that was asked by the state defense, you open the door. And if I'm correct, if I'm incorrect, let me know. But I believe your questions that you began to ask of the witness were the reasons why somebody would drive into someone and not brake. And you brought up maybe somebody's trying to commit suicide. So what I'll do is I'll have court reporter, excuse me, could you find his question on the record in regards to that? And if you'll read that, please, with the answers from the witness.
The best of my ability.
Thank you.
Judge, I go off words. Can you give me a word that I can look for?
Suggest person not aware.
And I'll be able to find it as well. Just give me a moment.
The question, it's possible they're not aware? Is that?
I'll find it.
Should be a good spot.
I think that was after.
You have another question, because otherwise if they're not paying attention, they're not aware, right?
Yes.
And he says, right.
No, I mentioned distractions.
There's going back to the fact on the crash report, there are millions of reasons why people aren't, it's called distraction in the vehicle, right? I've had people drop phones in crash. I've had.
That's the area. So if you can go from there, from when the defense, the question that he asked, and read back from there.
That I just read, Judge?
Yes, go to the question that's before that, so that defense will know the question that defense asked.
Question, and you'd agree that suggests that person isn't aware of the potential consequences? Answer, or he's not paying attention, one of the two. Question, it's possible they're not aware. Answer, for the reason or for one reason or another, they're not paying attention or not aware. Or not aware, he says, because otherwise, if they're not paying attention, they're not aware, right? He says, right. And there's going back to the fact on the crash report, there are millions of reasons why people aren't, it's called distraction in the vehicle, right? I've had people drop phones and crash. I've had people text and crash on the phone. There's lots of reasons to be distracted. Question, because in your training and experience, you know I'm not sure that word, you are likely to kill yourself if you drive into the back of someone like that. Answer, there's a good possibility of injury, yes. Do I stop or do I keep on going?
No, that's not. Counsel, you open the door. The state's question in no way is suggesting that Mr. Castro is intoxicated. The question is the different reasons why somebody would not break. And defense, you open the door to why someone would not break your question.
If I may, Judge,
Yes.
and I obviously object to the answers given. It's my position that I didn't answer. I was talking about the awareness. I'm talking about the mental state required. The witness, I believe, if I interpret the readback correctly, it was the witness, the sergeant, who said, bringing distraction in. I never said distracted.
All right, do you have an objection to the witness's answer?
I do, Judge.
And what is your
It's a
objection?
violation of the court's motion in limine.
All right, that will be overruled. Is there anything else?
Judge, I'd like to make a record if I can. If I may.
You can make the record after we finish with the jurors, okay?
Yes, Judge.
All right, do I bring the jurors in?
All right, so adjourned.
And say the court's previous motion in limine still stands. And he was talking about generally.
Yes, John. And when the jury comes back in, I was gonna ask him, since it was an objection, if he can just repeat himself.
And then is your other witness here?
Yes, John.
And then state defense. For the next witness that's coming up, I believe it's related to the vehicles.
Yes, that's correct.
And so if we can get to that point, so I can make my ruling, because I do want the jurors to be able to have a lunch. So it will be a late lunch.
Judge, if you would like, could we bring that sergeant in, and then, I don't know if you want to do it in front of the jury or not, we can have that at the beginning.
Well, I want the defense to have a chance to ask whatever questions
Okay.
they want to ask.
I don't know if you want that outside the presence jury, or?
Yeah, let's do this. Let's
Sorry, Judge.
Deputy Laura, we're ready.
Ready?
Mhm.
All right, for the jury,
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, state.
Thank you. Sergeant Doyle, right before the jury stepped out, there was an objection, but I'd like to ask you, I asked you that question of about one of the major reasons. Can you please just restate what you, the answer that you had?
In particular, right around the time that the crash happened, the most common reason is intoxication. It's right after the bars let out, and it's one of the most dangerous times on the road.
Thank you. No further questions, John.
Defense.
Briefly, and Sergeant, what, you know this from your training experience, what standard of proof do you need to arrest somebody at the scene?
Probable cause,
Probable
reasonable suspicion, and then you build it to probable cause.
Yeah, and at the scene, Mr. Castro was allowed to leave eventually, right?
He was.
He wasn't arrested for any offense at the scene,
No, we needed to determine speed accurately.
so no. Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate you. No further questions possible, Judge.
No further questions from the state.
All right. Is he excused? I understand your other issue, but is he excused?
Yes, please, Judge.
Excused?
Yes, Judge. So, yeah.
All right, and just make
No
sure that
recall.
you're not going to be recalled
Okay.
for testimony, but just make sure you not leave just yet. Just wait in the back, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, state, call your next witness.
The state calls Sergeant Bianca Martinez.
And you want to maybe approach very briefly?
Yes. All right, Sergeant Martinez, please. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take this witness briefly. Then I'm going to let you all have your lunch, okay?
Mr. Chairman, you know the mic.
All right, everyone, please speak into the microphones. Could everyone please do that? Thank you. Can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
It's Bianca Martinez.
All right, state.
Now, Sergeant Martinez, who do you currently work for?
The San Antonio Police Department.
And how long have you worked for the San Antonio Police Department?
A little over 11 years.
And what training did you receive to become a San Antonio Police Department officer?
So the standard training through our police academy. My class was approximately 7 to 8 months long for training.
And have you received any other additional training since that time?
Extensive training, yes.
In what areas?
Mainly traffic investigation, so crash reconstruction.
And what type of training did you receive in the area of crash reconstruction?
Oh, I've been to numerous classes. Let me see. I brought my resume in just so I didn't forget any. So I've been to all of the courses required for crash reconstruction. So it's the basic investigation class, the intermediate investigation class, there's an advanced investigation class, and then finally there's a reconstruction class.
And in these classes, what did you learn to do?
Investigate and analyze evidence at crash scenes in order to reconstruct them.
And just in general, what goes into crash reconstruction?
There's numerous things. It's mainly a lot of physics and math in order to reconstruct scenes.
And what do you use in order to reconstruct the scenes?
We have a lot of different equipment. The main equipment that we use out at the scene is the brand that we use is Leica. It's a total station. Very similar to surveyor equipment.
And what do you do with this equipment?
So once we get it all set up, we use it to mark and map, essentially map points out at the scene. So any evidence that we can see out at the scene, tire marks, scrape marks, there'll be marks for, we call it spatter, but it's essentially like liquid splatter, gouge marks, just anything that we can see out on the roadway. We typically mark all of those points. We also mark the vehicles, we outline the vehicles, and then the scene itself. So the roadway, the lane lines, jersey walls, so like the concrete barriers, things like that.
And then how would you take all these measurements or markings and determine something like someone's speed?
So we take the measurements off from the mapping of the points. So whatever points we map with the surveyor equipment, we take the measurements from those.
And how are you figuring it out, I guess, from those measurements and everything there?
So we're using all of the measurements, and we're essentially plugging those numbers into the crash math formulas that we have.
And are these crash math formulas, are they standard in the crash reconstruction field?
Yes, sir.
And have they been backed by studies that have been performed, not by you, but by others beforehand?
Yes, sir. Yeah, not by me. It's nationally accepted, the crash reconstruction science.
And so are you certified as a crash reconstructionist?
Yes, sir.
So I want to take you back to July 22nd of 2022. Were you working that night?
Yes, sir.
What shift were you working?
It's an overnight shift, so we have a daytime and a nighttime traffic investigation detail. So the night shift is from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m.
And do you recall ever being called out or receiving an indication that there was a crash out on 281?
Yes, sir.
And when you received that notification, where were you?
We were at a scene. It was a fatality scene that was downtown. I can't tell you the block number, but it was off of Elmira. It's Elmira near St. Mary's. It's essentially like what would be considered the access road that runs along 35.
And so you're there whenever you received this call. What did you do?
I instructed the officers. So we're going based off of what we're being told over the phone. I have no idea what that scene looks like. I have no idea what the officers have out there. So I'm limited to the details that they're providing over the phone, unfortunately. And the officer said that the officer at the time, it was Officer Morgan. He called and he said that he wasn't quite sure how the crash happened. He said there were multiple vehicles involved. He was kind of explaining so there was a primary crash, which caused a little bit of a backup on the highway. And then there was this subsequent crash. So he was kind of trying to explain all that over the phone, but the details were all kind of jumbled, because I think he was also confused of what was going on out there. It was just a lot to handle, I think. And he basically said that the victim may have suffered life-threatening injuries.
And what did you tell him once you heard that?
So that happens to us a lot. A lot of officers call and say that victims may have suffered life-threatening injuries. EMS kind of says that as a precautionary. They say, this person may be life-threatening because they have critical injuries. So we instruct the officer to obviously follow to the hospital and call us immediately with an update. with their condition, because once they get to the hospital, there's doctors and surgeons essentially that are evaluating them. We kind of get a better idea of their status.
So working with TID, is it just you that's working that shift, or how many other people are working?
That evening, I believe it was, me and two other detectives and then our sergeant. So there were four of us that night, if I recall correctly.
So at that time, if you had been given more information, would you have then been able to maybe split someone off and send them up to that location?
Yeah, it wouldn't be atypical that we have to, there's been many nights where we've had to split up and go handle scenes. I've handled many scenes on my own, by myself.
So that night, you didn't immediately go to that accident scene that was out on 281?
No, so we were at that, like I said, it was a fatality scene, downtown. And I know it was me and Detective Orta, because he was the handling detective for that scene. And then my sergeant was there, Sergeant Johnson. I don't remember if Detective Doyle was at that scene. I can't recall if he was or not. But essentially we were handling the personnel that were there, you know, we were needed to handle that. And then we got called for another scene besides the one on North, besides the one on 281.
So while you're handling this other scene, did you ever get an update as to what was happening on 281?
No, I never received a subsequent phone call.
When did you end up following up with that scene?
Unfortunately, when we got back to the office, so by the time we finished, like I said, we received another call. There was a scene in South Patrol. I'm not too sure where that scene was. I can't remember, but I know it was in South Patrol. A vehicle drove through a house and seriously injured the occupant, the resident. So I know we went to that scene and we returned to the office at approximately 5 a.m. And I remembered not getting an update from North Patrol. So I was just looking at the calls. We have a call screen with all of our active and pending calls. So I was just, you know, looking at the call to make sure we weren't needed. And again, that happens a lot. EMS will say someone's life threatening, they get to the hospital and they're not, they're fine, they're stable. You know, essentially we're not needed at those scenes. But the call said that they were awaiting our arrival.
And so what did you do when you saw that the call said it was awaiting your arrival?
I immediately let my supervisor know that they've been waiting for us for several hours.
And did you end up contacting Officer Morgan again?
I did.
And did you ask about what, for any updates?
Yeah, at that point, he said he forgot to call to provide an update on the victim's condition. But that basically she, I think at that point she was on life support.
So then did you make your way down to that scene on 281?
Yes, we immediately loaded the vehicle back up. We use a large truck. It's like our equipment truck. It's an Ford, or it's a Ford F-450. And it has all of our, it's like a big box truck. It has all of our equipment. So we had to load back up because that's stored at headquarters and we typically unload it every night. So we had to load it back up and then go all the way out to 281 and like TPC way or.
Now, how long was it between when you first got notice of the accident and when you finally made your way out there?
My best guess is about 3 hours.
And when you arrived at the scene, what was the first thing that you did?
So what we do at every scene is we walk the scene. So once we get there, we walk the entire crash scene from where it appears it started to the very end to where all the vehicles are stopped and stationary. And that was a pretty good distance.
And what are you looking for whenever you're walking the scene?
Just any apparent roadway evidence. So vehicle debris, vehicle parts, tire marks, skid marks. There's a gouging that's very apparent, typically on asphalt, though this was a concrete road. So we saw scrape marks, but they're difficult to see on concrete. So the roadway's light, like, you know, white or cream, light gray. Very hard to see scrape marks on that roadway, but tire marks are very apparent. Obviously vehicle debris, plastic, metal everywhere all over the road. Again, the vehicle spatter, like the liquids that come out of the cars, things like that. So that's all very apparent on concrete roadway.
And did you get a chance to actually look at the vehicles that were involved in the scene?
Yes.
And how many vehicles were directly involved in the scene?
Technically, the 3 vehicles, the 18-wheeler did get, there was contact made, but it wasn't anything that left any kind of significant damage.
But other than the 18-wheeler, what other vehicles were involved?
It was I believe all the vehicles were 2019s, around that year, but it was a Volkswagen Atlas, which is a larger SUV. And then the Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck, and then the Honda Accord.
And so you actually got to see these vehicles in person.
Yes, all 3, yes.
And why is it important for you to see these vehicles in person?
There was a substantial amount of damage to all 3 vehicles, of substantial, it's we call crush. So the amount of intrusion into vehicles, it's not very apparent in photos, if you're looking at a plane, you know, like a flat plane surface. So being able to see the vehicles in person and see how much intrusion, how much, yeah, I don't know if intrusion is understood, but how much they're dented, essentially like dented in or invaded, by the other vehicles or by each other. That allowed us to kind of recreate the crash and understand, angles, like the impact angles, and just the amount of force essentially.
So just from looking at the vehicles alone, it gave you plenty of information. And again, it's in-person viewing that really helped you.
Sustain.
So would viewing the vehicles in person, would that be the first step in your investigation?
So basically, yeah, like I said, the initial thing that we do when we get out there is we have to walk the entire scene. And we're of course looking at all of the vehicle damage, all of the roadway evidence. And that's what allows us to be able to tell how a crash happened.
And Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Now, Sergeant Martinez, have you had a chance to view these vehicles since July 22nd of 2022?
Object relevance?
Overruled.
Yes, sir, I've viewed them multiple times since the crash.
And in the time between now and July 22nd of 2022, have they changed in appearance?
No, they look very, very similar to how they did out at the scene.
And any differences, what differences have you seen, if any?
It's just gonna be, so they're stored out at our city facility, grout and impound. It's not a paved facility. It's dirt, and it's like clay dirt. So a lot of the vehicles, when we go back out to do any kind of investigation, they're typically covered in dirt. And then they're exposed to the elements. The employees there do try to wrap them. It's like a shrink, almost like a saran wrap. They do try to wrap them, to the best of their ability. But unfortunately that they're still exposed. They're outside. It's not covered or anything. They're exposed to the elements.
And just to clarify, or just to ask, if someone were to maybe go and inspect the vehicles, to go inside one of them and to look inside, would that affect any sort of analysis that you would get from looking at the vehicle?
Objection, that's cause speculation.
Overruled.
Can you re-ask her?
So if someone were to, let's say, go inside one of these vehicles and try to get some property, would that affect any of the observations that you would have made?
No, and no one's allowed to do it. If the vehicles are on evidence hold, which all of our vehicles are for our cases, they're not allowed to do that by themselves. So they're accompanied by an officer or a detective, and all of that's monitored.
And Your Honor, again, can we approach?
All right, just have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna have you step back and I'm gonna have you brought out in 10 minutes time. Remember my previous instructions. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated. And state and defense, I believe this is the part where the state is going to be requesting that the jurors be allowed to see the vehicles in person. Is that correct?
Yes, Judge, at this time.
All right, defense, do you have any questions as it relates to that request by the state? Oh, please remain
Sorry.
seated. Do you have any objections or do you have questions for the witness as it relates to whether or not the jurors should be allowed to view the vehicles in person?
I have objections, Judge. I can ask the Sergeant a couple of questions, but I don't really have much for Sergeant, to be honest.
All right, if you just have objections without asking questions, you may proceed with your objections.
I'll do that, Your Honor. And so, Judge, we are, sorry, I'll stand, Judge. I don't know why, but
No
it's the way
problem.
I've been raised, right? So, Judge, we do object, and we maintain and re-urge our original objections. It's an improper, and if I may I move around the courtroom, Judge?
Yes.
It's an improper representation of the accident scene. We had expert testimony from Detective Doyle, who I stood here and he testified that the purpose of State's Exhibits 94, 95, 96, and 97 are to accurately diagram and map out the scene of this crash. And he said on the stand, he does that, SAPD does that for the jury. And he said, this is the best representation that the jury can have of this accident. That and all of the photographic evidence and video evidence that the state has introduced, Judge. I mean, they have introduced approximately, I don't know, Judge, 20 hours of body camera and dash cam camera. There are 50 photographs of the scene, including two blow-ups.
All right, counsel, would you like to address the issue of the witness's testimony? And I'm sorry, does someone still want the witness to be on the stand as we,
Sergeant can be excused from us, Judge.
Can we release it for lunch?
all right, so you can go have lunch.
Thank you.
I'm going to give the jurors till 1:45. All right. So, counsel, of course, I'm just looking at the factors that I have to consider. And this witness has testified that what you see in person with the vehicles would be different than what's in the photographs. That was her testimony.
It was, Judge.
All right, so those are one of the factors for me to consider on whether or not I would allow the jury to view the vehicles. So that's number one. The other is the expense, but it doesn't appear to be a great expense because the vehicles are right downstairs. So if we could address those issues, because that seems to be one of the main issues, counsels, is the fact that the witness is saying that what has been viewed in the photographs is not or cannot be is different from what you would see if you view the vehicle in person.
I appreciate it, Your Honor. And the problem with that I have with that, my objection is one that would be cumulative. So it'd be cumulative under 403. That's the first one. And also, Your Honor, the case law that we've discussed before, the state directs the court to Mauricio in their motion, and I should say Mauricio versus state. And would you like the? No, I can give you it in a second. Give you the citation in a minute. And Mauricio versus state says, Judge, and you are citing from it, I believe, with your analysis. It also says the extent to which the place or objects to be viewed may have changed in appearance since the controversy began. Now, the detective said that they're covered in dirt. Just one thing, the windshield is out of the Honda Accord now, and it wasn't before. And I believe, what one is that, Jasmine? What the Accord's got the window out, which state's exhibit? And you can see that from the state's exhibits that they've already offered. And it's in the body camera. There's grass growing out of the wheels of some of the vehicles. They have substantially changed. It's a misrepresentation of the accident scene. And Judge, and I point the court to State's Exhibit 10. Can I approach, Judge?
Yes.
And State's Exhibit 11, that are State's exhibits. In these, you see that the windshield is in the Honda Accord. It's no longer in there, Judge. There is debris in the back of the truck, Mr. Castro's truck, that wasn't there before. It's a misrepresentation, Judge. It's a misrepresentation of the scene. Any probative value is substantially outweighed by the 403 factors of risk of cumulative evidence. And Judge, frankly, there is a risk that the jury's passions could be inflamed by viewing Ms. Siebert's vehicle in person, which will outweigh any probative value. And they've changed since then. And the last thing is, the other reason it's a misrepresentation. Now, the sergeant said about the scene and accurately portraying the scene. There were 3 vehicles. Oh, but there was 4. There's an 18-wheeler. There's no 18-wheeler parked outside. It's a misrepresentation of the scene. You can't recreate it. That's why we do the diagrams. The case law says it should be done if, and I, of course, what your other says is right about the expense, but the
Well,
state's already got.
the question, counsel, is, and this is just my questions. The question is, are the vehicles being brought here for the purpose of a recreation of the scene? Or are the vehicles being brought here for the vehicles to be viewed? Because if the vehicles are being brought here to recreate the accident scene, then guess what? That's outside this courthouse, is not 281. All of the vehicles that are alleged to have been on the 281 are not here. So first question with regards to your argument, state, are these vehicles being brought here for you to recreate or do a recreation of the scene?
No, ma'am. It's so that the jurors can see.
All right, so it's not being brought to recreate the accident scene. So I will tell both parties this, I am finding that the officer has stated that viewing the vehicles in person brings something different as opposed to viewing them in photographs, that you can't see in photographs what you're able to see in person with the vehicles. So that's number one. Now, the next thing for the court to consider is what's the probative value of it, whether it's more prejudicial than probative. So if you all would like to address those issues, then please do so.
Thank you, Judge. And so I do believe it is more prejudicial than probative. I believe that it is, like I said earlier, Judge, it's cumulative to start off with because there's so many pictures and so much.
Well,
video
let's
experiences.
start here. I like to do things logically.
Yep.
First question. What is it probative of? State.
Judge, it's probative of the crush factor. That's what she was testifying to the jury about, that you could see just from looking at the cars, the impact angle, the crush, the speed, just from looking at them alone. So that in and of itself is probative.
All right. So the state is saying that's the probative value of these vehicles.
That doesn't go to the recklessness of Mr. Castro. So it's not probative to an element in the indictment. And so that would be my answer to that, Judge.
Okay. All right. No. I'm listening. All right. Is there anything else from either side with regards to whether or not the jurors should see the vehicles in person?
Nothing from the state, Judge.
Very briefly, Judge, we believe
Yes.
that any probative value it's cumulative to start off with, and any probative value is outweighed by the possibility of misleading the jury to whether or not they should be looking at crush factors, and that could lead to their passions being inflamed and an emotional reaction and making a decision on an improper basis, when what they should be deciding is whether or not Mr. Castro was reckless in his actions.
All right. And so with regards to your argument, defense, in the indictment, isn't there an issue or a raised issue concerning speed? And does not the way the vehicles appear sort of address that a little?
Well, Your Honor, if I may address that, that's a good point, Judge. And so I would say that that's a good point, because the jury, the speed would be an expert opinion that we'd expect to have from an expert on the stand through testimony or objects. If we could be asking the jury to make an improper conclusion of speed based on their lay experience and looking at the objects themselves, which may make them have that emotional reaction that could make them make a decision on an improper basis of speed even, which should come through an expert. And so that would be almost asking them to make an expert opinion as a layperson. It could, that's what confused the jury and mislead.
Well, if the court allows this, there will be no questioning of the jurors. It's strictly for the jurors to view it. And then both sides, of course, will have a chance to question witnesses on the witness stand. So if there are no further arguments, the court is prepared to make its ruling.
You want to add one more thing to that?
Yes.
And we've already had testimony from an expert who said that this accident happened. It was clear that it was at high rate of speed. So it's, and that's from Detective Doyle.
Okay.
Certainly cumulative.
All right.
Thank you.
So the court is performing a 4-3 balancing test. The court is going to find that it's more probative than prejudicial. I'm going to do, I'm going to have the jury come back in. I'm going to give the jurors instructions. There will be no questioning of the jurors. I'm going to give the jurors instructions that they are allowed to walk around the vehicles. Deputy Laura will escort the jurors around the vehicle. Nobody is allowed to speak to the jurors. The jurors are going to be instructed that they are not allowed to speak to each other. They're not allowed to make comments about what they see. Does everyone understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Judge. And Judge, I take it my objections overruled.
Yes,
And Your Honor, I think you'd mentioned earlier about who's going downstairs earlier.
yes. So I would suggest that the persons who go downstairs would be the attorneys. Of course, you're allowed to go, but you will not be walking around with the jurors. The jurors will be walking around by themselves with Deputy Laura. You will not stand on the side of the walkway where the vehicles are. You will be on the opposite side. Does everyone understand?
Yes, sir.
There is to be absolutely no interaction with the jurors. I understand that sometimes emotions run high, but there are to be no showing of emotions because I want both sides to have a fair jury. Does everyone understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, and we'll bring the jurors in.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have your lunch break, but before I give you your lunch break, Deputy Laura is going to escort you down between the two courthouses. Between the two courthouses will be vehicles. You will be allowed to walk around those vehicles and see those vehicles. You are not allowed to discuss what you are seeing with anyone. So for example, if you're walking around a vehicle and if you see a flower, you're not to turn to the other juror and say, oh, there's a flower. There is to be no discussion, no comment whatsoever. The only thing you will be doing is walking around the vehicles to look at the vehicles. Neither the state's attorney nor the defense attorneys will speak to you. Does everyone understand?
Yes.
Right. And then after we do that, I'll have Deputy Laura bring you up and then I'll let you take your lunch break and we will be back at 1:45. So Deputy Laura is going to escort you. And again, no one has leave to speak to you except for Deputy Laura letting you know where you're going to be going. And do not ask her any questions about what you're seeing. Do not talk to anybody about what you're seeing. Does everyone understand? All right, so everyone please rise for the jurors. And everyone, 1:45, okay?